Everyone, it's Nikki. So, this video is going to be a little bit more serious and more personal than a lot of the other videos that I've uploaded so far. And I'd like to just give a content warning that I'm going to be referencing suicide thoughts and feelings of worthlessness. I'm going to be doing that early in the video, so you can probably scroll ahead if you don't want to hear about those things specifically. So, for anybody who's new to my channel, um, college was a traumatic experience for me. And in my senior year of college, I was having suicide thoughts. I felt worthless and I felt like nothing about me was good enough. Now, prior to going to college, I had never felt that way before ever. I had unconditional self esteem. I had unconditional love at home. I was very, very close with my parents, my grandparents, my aunt. I just had a very close knit family group where I had unconditional love, and I just felt inherently good about myself. It wasn't based on any qualities I had, anything I did. It just wasn't based on anything. It was inherent. And when I went to college, that changed. I was in an environment where I just felt like nothing about me was good enough. And every good thing that I could think of about myself was either not valued in that environment or it wasn't good enough because everybody else was so much better than me at it. And in my senior year, when I was having the suicide thoughts, I was racking my brain trying to come up with something that I was good at, something that made me special, that, I was good at, that everybody else at the school wasn't better than me at. And the two things I thought of were number one, being a good friend, because most people at the school were not good friends, and also just knowing about validation and consent consciousness, knowing that I could educate people and change the culture to be more validating and more consent conscious. And that is how I made a choice in my senior year of college to stay alive so that I could do those things because that made me feel like I had a value. That's the reason why I had such a big emotional crash after publishing my book, Redefining Positive, because it was, I had based my entire self worth on the success of that book and on the book's ability to change the culture to be more validating. And do I want to change the culture? Of course. Of course, I do want to change the culture to be more validating, but I never meant to base my entire self worth on that. I never meant to feel like I wasn't good enough if I couldn't achieve that right away and, or achieve it at all. And, I still believe in my book, but it has taken a lot of therapy to untangle my self worth from the success of my first book. But I think what's even harder than that is untangling my self-worth from being a good friend, and that caused a lot of problems when I tried to untangle that. See, when you I value being a good friend, but I never used to base my self-worth on it. And when you base your self-worth on something, the way that you do it is very different than how you would do it if you did not base your self-worth on it. For example, if you defined yourself by your ability to be productive at work, you might put work ahead of everything else in a way that you otherwise wouldn't. You may not sleep enough, not eat enough, not take care of yourself enough, neglect your relationships, neglect other things that are important to you because you feel like your entire value as a human being is based on your ability to be productive at work. Now, let's say you were able to sever that connection. You were able to say, you know what, my value as a human being is inherent. I have self worth regardless of what I produce, regardless of what effect I have on the world. I just inherently have self worth for existing, which is what I had as a kid. Now, you might still value your work a lot. You might still say, you know what, I'm really passionate. I really care about the work that I do. Um, but you are probably going to do it very differently than you did when your entire self-worth was based on it. You might prioritize other things like taking care of yourself, your relationships, other things that you like to do, even if your work still matters a lot to you. And inevitably, when you sever that connection, you are probably in some way going to be less productive at work once you've severed that. And that's something that's going to happen. Um, a lot of people, when they talk about not having your self-worth based on your job, it's like if it's not your career, it's relationships. Like the other thing I've seen a lot of people say is like, well, the career is secondary, but the most important thing is family and relationships, valuing being a good parent, being a good spouse, being a good friend, a good sibling, a good whatever, that's all about your relationships. And my relationships are very important to me. They are top priority. But again, I never placed my self worth on my ability to be all of those things. And, you know, the way that I was being a good friend was that I felt like I was an inherently undesirable person. I felt like I was just not a person that anybody liked. I wasn't likable. I wasn't lovable. I wasn't somebody that anybody would want as a friend because that's how I was treated in college. And I felt like I had to compensate for that. When I was, you know, always there for people no matter what, always answering the phone, always stopping to talk about everything that everyone else wanted to talk about, being willing to miss an art fair and go sit in the car and stare at a concrete wall. Like all of these things that I did not want to do, but I felt like I had to because I felt like my value as a human being was based on being a good friend, and I felt like I had to overcompensate for the fact that I wasn't a likable person. Okay, because that's how it was in college. That's how it was in my traumatic experience. I felt like the only people who valued me were people who needed the validation and support that I could give them that nobody else on campus would give them because most people were just not validating. And and I think to some extent our culture reinforces that. Our culture values certain types of people, people who are extroverted, people who are laid back and chill. And if you read one of these lists of why should you be friends with an introvert, or why should you be friends with someone who's like highly sensitive, or whatever it is, a lot of times they come out sounding justified, sounding like, well, of course you inherently would not want to be friends with a person like that, but here are their good qualities to make up for it. That's what I felt like I was doing. I felt like I had to make up for it. And that's why I had a really hard time not picking up the phone every single time, not ever saying no, not always saying when I didn't agree, when we weren't the same on everything, when people assumed that we were the same on everything when we just weren't. Um, so yeah, I just sacrificed a lot of things that I want to do and things that I wanted to be because I felt like I had to overcompensate in order to have friends and make people like me. And I do want to clarify something in case anyone who I know is watching this. This is a very specific time period. So my trauma happened in 2006 and I began to heal in 2017. That was when I first began therapy and therapy class and when I started to heal. So anyone who knew me before the year 2007, like people who've known me my whole life or from when I was younger, you know the real me. Like you know how I was before the trauma, and you know that this is not me. Like I was not somebody who was like always there and made all those sacrifices. Like that's not how you would describe me when I was younger before this. And if you met me later, like 2017 and on, you met me while I was into my healing journey. So this wouldn't apply because I was by 2017 when I started getting help, getting therapy, I was already working past this. And especially anyone who's met me very recently, like 2021 on, I'm basically healed at this point. So this is not something that is really going on right now. It really is more like between the years of 2007 and 2016, anyone that I sort of met during that time, it's like the person you met is not the person who I wanted to be. You met a traumatized version of me. And I'll give one example of something that was a sacrifice that I did not want to make. At one point in, I think it was 2014 August, or July, I said that I was changing my name to Amelia. I was gonna be Amelia Untamable, and I was gonna go out and do all these things that I really want to do. I was gonna be angry, I was gonna fight back, I was gonna do everything I wanted to do and stop being the good girl Nikki who only existed because of trauma. And what I will admit now, when I look back on my blog and when I look at like what I said about being Amelia Untamable at that time, I'll admit that it was a little bit more extreme than who the real Nikki is, but ultimately what I was really trying to do is get back to how I was before the trauma, because before the trauma I wasn't someone who entirely valued my self-worth on being a good person and being a good friend and doing what other people wanted and being nice and being friendly and being caring and kind. Like that, I did not define myself that way. And I wanted to go back to that, and that was what Amelia meant to me. It was nothing about adventure, it had nothing to do with Amelia Earhart or anything like that. It was very specific to me. It may have been a little bit more extreme what I was talking about then than who I actually want to be, but becoming Amelia, changing my name to Amelia at that time was getting closer to how I want to be than where I currently was. The reason I backed down on that was because somebody else got really, really upset about it, because being Amelia basically meant that I wasn't going to be the same kind of friend to that person. I immediately apologized and begged for forgiveness and said, "Oh, I won't be Amelia because, of course, you need Nikki. You need me to be Nikki." Well, the thing is, that is a trauma response. Being Amelia was not a trauma response, but apologizing for something I was not sorry for is a trauma response. Before my trauma happened, anytime that I apologized for anything, I was truly sorry. I never said sorry if I wasn't sorry. I mean, maybe when you're a little kid and your parents make you do it, but like, from a reasonable age on, when I apologized, I meant it, but this was a trauma response. There was one time in college in my senior year where I got in trouble for something, and I don't wanna go into the details of that now, but, in order to have the best results where nothing really bad happened to me, I pretty much had to be very compliant, very submissive, very much doing what everybody else wanted me to do and playing nice and pretending to not be angry and that nothing was wrong when a lot of things were wrong. I went into what's called a fawning response. Now, I know a lot of people have heard of a fight or flight response that, when you're in a threatening situation, you do fight or flight, and sometimes you just freeze up, fight, flight, freeze. There's actually a fourth one called fawning, where what you might do in a tense situation where you really feel severely threatened is you go into this mode of being very submissive and giving the other person everything that they want. Now, that can be a good skill. Like if I were being held at gunpoint and someone said, "Give me your wallet," I'm going to give them my wallet. That's, more important, of course, but that can kick in other times, and pre-trauma, I could handle people being mad at me. Like I did not curl up into a ball and automatically, as an automatic response, apologize and beg for forgiveness if someone was mad. I would think about it. I would think, well, gee, did I do something wrong here? Like, like when I think about it, did I do something wrong? And if I did do something wrong, then I would apologize for it. And I would say, I'm sorry, and like promise not to do it again and stuff and change that. But if I didn't agree with it, if I was like, "Well, no, I'm not sorry, like that is something that I'm going to be doing regularly," I would not apologize. I would say so. I was comfortable fighting. I was comfortable fighting back then. And I wasn't now. So I regularly would go into these fawning responses where anytime that I said anything that I was angry or anything like that, and if somebody else called me out on it or was upset about something I said, I would go into a fawning response and apologize and beg for forgiveness. And I would pretend that the angry thing was the trauma response, when the reality was the angry thing or whatever it was that upset the other person, being Amelia or whatever it was that upset the other person, I would pretend that that was actually the trauma response, when in reality that was real, and the trauma response was the fact that I fake apologized. And I haven't done that in a long time. Like, it's been years since I've done that. Um but I don't ever want to do that again, and it really all goes back to trauma, because all along this whole time I have wanted to be the person that I was before the trauma happened. That has been my goal the entire time. I never wanted to be this person who was always there no matter what, to the detriment of like things that I wanted to do. Okay. And I never wanted to define myself as a person who spread validation and consent consciousness. Yeah, that's something I want to do, but it's on a to do list of a million things that I want to do. It's just one thing, it's just one dot on my to do list. And um, I know people have gotten attached to that as my primary purpose in life, but it's not, and it never was. Like, my primary goal was to be the way that I was before. And one of the happiest things that's happened to me recently is that I've been going to this speed friending event in the city. And one of the we ask each other deep questions, and one of the deep questions is something that, what do you value most about yourself? And when it's my turn to answer that question, I always say I value my stubbornness. And that makes me so happy, not specifically about stubbornness, but because prior to trauma, if somebody asked me, what are your good qualities? What do you like about yourself? Let me see. I would have said that I was passionate, I was creative, I was determined, I was fun, I was imaginative. I would talk about all these qualities. Um None of the qualities that I would have listed would have had anything to do with anybody else. I know that other people might have said, like, things like kind, caring, friendly, things like that. I would not have named those as like the number one things for me. But ever since the trauma happened, ever since I began to define my self-worth, I would now list qualities like validating, consent conscious, understanding, good friend, all that. I value those things, yes, but it's not like the top thing that I want to define myself by. And it made me so happy at this event every night when I say that the thing I value is my stubbornness, because that's just a me thing. That's in the same category as saying creativity or passion or anything like that that isn't defining by other people. The fact is, the person that other people were attached to is dead now. I mean, that's what therapy meant to me. I used to do this thing where I would claim that I was going to work on relationship stuff in therapy, which I never was going to. I mean, therapy is mine. It is completely mine. I would not go into therapy to do something that was for somebody else, okay? I've already been through that. The therapy that I got in college was detrimental to me, and it had nothing to do with my well-being. The therapy that I got in college was to cause me to behave in a way that would make others comfortable. I would never go to therapy to make others comfortable. Therapy is for me. And if anybody else happens to benefit from my therapy, that's a perk. That's an extra thing. That's like the little ketchup packet that you get for free when you get a sandwich or something, but like, the sandwich is mine and I'm not sharing it, okay? Like, get your own therapy. It's not for anybody else. And I made it sound like I was going to be working in therapy and specifically getting EMDR for the purpose of not having these types of outbursts anymore, for the purpose of not saying what I really want to say. And that is not the case. I was getting therapy and getting EMDR so that I could go back to being the person that I was before trauma happened. And if for anybody who knew me between the years of 2006 and 2017, meaning you didn't meet me afterwards, but you didn't know me before that, then the only version of me that you ever knew was a traumatized person who I never wanted to be. And because of the therapy and because of the work that I've done and the new friends that I've made, that person is dead. And I actually wrote an obituary for her on a blog. I said, traumatized Nikki was born on September 1st, 2006, and died after a long, painful struggle in 2021. Traumatized Nikki was best known for people pleasing, giving other people what they wanted, being there for other people no matter what they needed. She is survived by untraumatized Nikki, who does what she wants, regardless of what anyone else thinks about it. Um, in lieu of flowers, please fully accept that traumatized Nikki is dead and that she will never come back, and do not attempt to resurrect her. Digging up dead bodies is creepy. So yeah, I just needed to share that because she is dead. And luckily at this point, most people in my life either haven't met her in the first place or knew me long before she was ever here. But I just want to be very clear that she is dead, and that version will never, ever come back.